It was a chilly afternoon when the CEO arrived at the small community center on the edge of the city. The building was old, with faded walls and a few cracks, but inside it carried warmth. Volunteers bustled about, helping people find food, warm clothes, and small comforts. The CEO had come for a charity visit, something he often did, but today felt different. Today, something in the air seemed to whisper that he would see something unexpected. As he walked through the lobby, he noticed a quiet figure sitting near an old, upright piano. The girl was hunched slightly over, her coat wrapped tightly around her. Her shoes were scuffed, and her hair fell loosely over her shoulders. She didn't look up as people passed by. She seemed small, fragile, like she was trying to disappear into the corner. But there was something in the way she held herself. Something that made him pause. He asked one of the volunteers about her. "She comes here often," the volunteer said softly. "She doesn't talk much. She likes to sit by the piano. She's been living in the shelter nearby for months. Music is her escape, I think." The CEO nodded slowly. He had seen a lot of people in his life, a lot of struggles, but there was a quiet dignity in her presence that caught his attention. Most people would have walked past her without noticing. But something told him that this girl, sitting there so quietly, was different. He walked closer. "Hi," he said gently, not wanting to startle her. The girl flinched slightly, but she didn't run. She kept her gaze down, her fingers twitching nervously on the edge of the piano keys. "I'm curious," he continued. "Can you play?" Her eyes flicked up for a brief second. Surprise flashed across her face. She shook her head softly. "No, not really. Sometimes I try." Her voice was quiet, almost swallowed by the room's hum. But it carried a strange mix of shyness and honesty. The CEO smiled warmly. "Would you like to try? Right now? Don't worry about anyone else. Just play what you feel." He didn't want to push her, but he wanted to give her the chance to step out of her quiet world. Even for a few moments, the girl hesitated. Her hands hovered above the keys. Memories of the few pianos she had touched in her life came rushing back, some joyful, some painful. She remembered sneaking into an abandoned music room in her school years. The thrill of her fingers hitting the keys. The way music made her heart feel lighter. Even when her stomach felt empty, she swallowed hard. I don't know if I can," she whispered. "Just try," the CEO said gently. "There's no wrong or right here. Just you and the piano. That's it." The girl glanced around. Volunteers were watching quietly, and a few people in the lobby had paused. There was a soft hush in the room, as if the building itself was holding its breath. She took a deep breath and sat on the worn piano bench, her hands trembling slightly. Her fingers hovered over the keys. 1, 2, 3, and then she pressed a single note. It was soft, tentative, almost fragile, but it was a note filled with emotion. Something shifted in the room. The quiet murmur of the volunteers faded. The air seemed heavier, charged with anticipation. She tried another note, then another, slowly building into a small melody. It was simple, not perfect, but it had a voice of its own. The CEO's eyes widened slightly. He had heard many musicians in his life, many trained and polished, but this was raw, real, and full of feeling. The girl's fingers moved more confidently now. Her back straightened a little, and she closed her eyes as she let the music guide her. She didn't think about who was watching. She didn't think about her difficult life or the shelter she had slept in last night. For these few moments she was free. The CEO watched, mesmerized. He had seen talent before, yes, but this wasn't just talent. It was resilience, courage, and the story of someone who had survived so much, yet still had something beautiful to give. He leaned slightly closer, careful not to distract her. Some of the volunteers whispered to each other, astonished. "She's incredible," one said. "I didn't know she could do this." Others nodded silently, afraid to break the spell. Even the staff who had seen her every day were surprised by the depth of her playing. The girl's melody changed as she continued. At times it was soft and gentle, like a whisper. At other times it grew stronger, louder, almost as if the piano itself was telling her story, the story of nights without enough food, days of loneliness and small moments of hope she had clung to. Each note seemed to carry a piece of her soul, and everyone listening felt it. Finally, she reached the last note. It lingered in the air, fragile yet powerful, and the room remained silent for a moment. Then slowly applause started. Soft at first, then growing louder as more people joined in. She opened her eyes, surprised, and looked around. Faces smiled at her, some teary-eyed, others simply amazed. The CEO stepped forward. "That was beautiful," he said softly. "Do you know how many people never get to hear something so real? You've touched everyone in this room with just a few notes." The girl's lips trembled, and she nodded, still unsure if she deserved the praise. She had never thought of herself as special or talented. She had thought of music only as a small comfort, something private, something that belonged to her alone. She had never imagined that others could feel what she felt when she played. "Where did you learn to play?" The CEO asked, genuinely curious. I didn't really learn," she admitted. "I just play sometimes, when I can find a piano." Her voice cracked slightly. She looked down at her hands. "That's all I know." The CEO shook his head, impressed. "You have a gift," he said. "A real gift. And it's too special to stay hidden. I want to help you share it. If you want, I'd like to give you a chance to play for more people, to show the world what you can do." The girl looked at him, eyes wide. "For real?" She whispered, double quotes, "Yes, for real," he said, smiling. "But only if you want to. No pressure. Just an opportunity." She hesitated, her mind racing. She had never imagined anything like this before. Her life had been about surviving day by day, about finding warmth and food and safety. She had never dreamed of playing in front of an audience, never thought anyone outside the shelter would care about her music. But something in the CEO's eyes, something kind, patient, and encouraging made her feel a tiny spark of hope. I think I'd like that," she said finally, her voice soft but steady. The CEO nodded. "Good, we'll make it happen. You'll have help? You'll have time. You'll have support. Just bring your music and we'll handle the rest." For the first time in a long time, the girl felt a little weight lift off her shoulders. She realized that maybe, just maybe, this small moment at the piano could be the start of something bigger. Something that could change her life. As the CEO walked away to speak with the staff, she sat for a moment staring at the piano keys. The music had stopped, but the feeling lingered. She wasn't sure what the future held, but she felt a strange sense of possibility, a sense that she could belong somewhere, that her music could matter, and that someone had finally seen her, not as a homeless girl, but as a person with a gift to share. And in that quiet community center, filled with the hum of life and the soft rustle of coats and footsteps, something shifted. A door had opened, and though the girl didn't yet know where it led, she felt the first spark of hope in a long time. For her, and for everyone who had stopped to listen, the day had already changed. The next morning, the girl woke earlier than usual. She lay in her small cot at the shelter and thought about yesterday. The memory of the CEO asking her to play, and the way people had listened to her music, made her heart beat faster. It was strange to feel excitement instead of fear, but she couldn't ignore it. Something had changed. Something inside her had woken up. She dressed quickly, pulling on clothes that were clean but worn, and made her way to the community center. Even though she had been coming there for months, today felt different. She wasn't just there to escape the cold or pass the time. Today she had a purpose. Today she was going to play again, and this time she would do it knowing that someone believed in her. When she arrived, the lobby was busier than usual. Volunteers were helping people with breakfast, and a few children ran around with small toys. The old piano still sat in its corner, worn and scratched, but to her it felt like a new friend. She walked slowly toward it, her fingers brushing the keys lightly. She closed her eyes and remembered the melody she had played yesterday. It felt comforting, familiar, and somehow alive. The CEO arrived shortly after she did. He smiled when he saw her and nodded as if to say, "You're ready." He didn't speak loudly or make a scene. He knew she needed space. But the way he looked at her, full of encouragement, made her feel a little braver. "Good morning," he said softly. "I wanted to check on you. Are you ready to try again?" The girl hesitated for a moment. I think so," she whispered. Her hands hovered over the keys. She took a deep breath, reminding herself that there was no wrong way to play, no one judging her. Just her and the piano. She pressed the first key. The sound was soft, almost hesitant, but it reminded her of yesterday. She tried another, then another. Slowly, the notes began to form a melody, a little more confident than before. She closed her eyes, letting the music guide her. As she played, she realized something remarkable. The music didn't just feel good to her, it seemed to reach the people around her. Volunteers stopped what they were doing to listen. A few children quietly gathered near the piano, fascinated by the sounds. Even the staff paused, amazed at how her small, trembling hands could create something so beautiful. The CEO watched closely, quietly amazed. He had seen many talented people in his life, but there was something extraordinary about the way this girl expressed herself. It wasn't just technical skill. It was emotion, honesty, and raw beauty all at once. Every note carried a story, every pause held meaning. It was as if the piano had become her voice, and the melody told everything she had never said out loud. Time seemed to slip away. The girl lost track of how long she had been playing. She didn't notice the sun shining through the windows or the footsteps of people passing by. She was completely absorbed in the music, and for the first time in a long time, she felt free. After a while, she finished a small piece. The notes lingered in the air, soft and warm, like a gentle sigh. The room remained quiet for a moment, as if everyone were holding their breath, savoring the sound. Then slowly applause began. Not loud at first, but quiet and heartfelt. Growing steadily as more people joined in, the girl opened her eyes, surprised again. She had played for herself, not for anyone else, and yet people were moved by her music. Her cheeks flushed, a mix of embarrassment and pride. She had never imagined that her playing could affect anyone like this. The CEO stepped forward. "That was incredible," he said softly. "You have a gift that goes beyond music. You can make people feel things they didn't know they could feel. That's something very rare." She looked down at the keys, unsure how to respond. I didn't know it could. Her words faltered. She had never been praised like this, never been told that she had something valuable to offer the world. It was a new and strange feeling, one that made her heart swell. "You don't have to understand it all now," the CEO said gently. "Just know that what you have is special, and it deserves to be shared." The girl nodded slowly, still processing. She thought about her life, about the nights she had slept on cold floors, about the meals she had missed, about the loneliness she had felt. And yet, here she was, playing music that made people stop and listen. She realized that her pain, her struggles, and her hope were all part of the music she created. Her experiences had shaped her melody, and now they were being heard. "Would you like to try something new?" the CEO asked. "Something a little bigger?" The girl blinked. "Bigger?" "Yes," he said. "You have a chance to perform at a charity event next week. A lot of people will be there. They want to hear your music. If you're willing, we can help you prepare." Her heart skipped a beat. She had never imagined performing in front of a large audience. The thought was terrifying but also exciting. She looked at the CEO, unsure if she could do it. "You can do it," he said, reading her hesitation. "We'll support you. You won't be alone. Just bring your music and your heart." The girl nodded slowly. She didn't fully believe she could do it, but she wanted to try. For the first time in a long time, she felt hope, a fragile, flickering hope. But hope nonetheless. Over the next few days, she spent every spare moment at the piano. Volunteers helped her practice, showing her small techniques and encouraging her to experiment with melodies. She discovered new ways to express herself, learned to listen to the music within her, and began to feel more confident with each note. She also started to open up a little to the volunteers. She shared small pieces of her life stories, of how she had found old, broken pianos on the street, how music had been her only friend in dark times, how she dreamed of creating something beautiful despite her circumstances. People listened with patience and kindness, and for the first time, she felt understood. The CEO visited a few times during this period. Each time, he offered gentle encouragement and practical advice. He reminded her that mistakes were part of the process, that emotion mattered more than perfection, and that her story was already inspiring people. His presence gave her courage, but he never pressured her. He let her grow at her own pace. Finally, the day of the charity event arrived. The girl felt a mix of fear and excitement as she prepared. She had never performed in front of so many people. The room was filled with donors, business people, and staff, all waiting to hear her music. She felt small and nervous, but she reminded herself of the first note she had played at the community center, the note that had started everything. She took a deep breath and let that memory guide her when she stepped onto the small stage. The lights were bright and the room fell silent. The piano sat in front of her, familiar and comforting, yet different in its importance. She sat down, her fingers trembling slightly, and placed them on the keys. The first note rang out. Soft, pure, and full of emotion. She closed her eyes and let the music flow through her, building slowly into a melody that carried all of her hopes, fears, and dreams. With each note, she felt stronger, more confident. The audience was captivated, leaning forward in their seats, listening intently to the story her music told. When she finished, the room erupted into applause. The sound was thunderous, overwhelming, and yet exhilarating. Tears streamed down some faces, and smiles were everywhere. She opened her eyes and saw the CEO standing at the side, clapping proudly, his smile wide and encouraging. For the first time, the girl realized that she had done something remarkable. She had shared a part of herself with the world, and the world had listened. She felt proud, grateful, and alive in a way she had never felt before. And in that moment, she knew that her journey was just beginning. The piano had become more than an escape. It was her voice, her story, and her future. She had taken her first step, and now the world was ready to hear her music. After her first performance at the community center, life began to change for the girl in ways she had never imagined. The memory of the CEO's encouragement and the applause from the audience stayed with her, lingering like a soft light in the corners of her heart. She realized that music was not just a private escape anymore. It could be her voice, a way to reach people, to touch hearts, and perhaps even change her life. The community center volunteers noticed a shift in her too. She walked with a little more confidence, her eyes brighter, and her smile appearing more often. She still had her quiet moments, of course, but there was now a spark within her that had been absent before. Even the shelter staff remarked on it. "She seems lighter," one said to another. "Like she's carrying hope instead of worry." The CEO continued to check on her progress. He arranged for her to have regular practice sessions at the center whenever the piano was available. Volunteers helped her clean the piano before she played, tuned the keys when they were off, and even found old music sheets that she could experiment with. Though she had learned mostly by ear, she found herself fascinated by the notes on the page. She tried to follow them at first, sometimes making mistakes, but each error became a lesson. Each correct note became a small triumph. One afternoon, as she played a soft melody, the CEO quietly entered the room and sat in a corner. He didn't say anything at first, just listened. The girl, noticing him, felt a mix of nerves and excitement. Would he think she wasn't good enough? Would he be disappointed? But as she continued, the music flowed naturally, and her doubts began to fade. When she finished, the CEO smiled warmly. "You're improving," he said. "And more importantly, you're finding your voice. That's the part that really matters. Technique can be taught, but your feeling for the music, that's yours. And it's beautiful." The girl felt her cheeks flush, both proud and shy. She had never been told anything like that before. She had spent most of her life feeling invisible, like no one really saw her. Yet here was someone telling her that not only could she play, but that her music mattered, that her feelings mattered. Over the next few days, she started experimenting more boldly. She played faster, slower, louder, softer, letting the piano carry every bit of her emotion. Sometimes the melodies were cheerful, almost dancing with energy. Other times they were soft and melancholic, reflecting the times when she had felt alone or scared. The volunteers watched quietly, knowing that each note told a story. Even if they couldn't fully understand all of it, she also began talking more about her music. "When I play," she told one volunteer, "it feels like the world stops for a little while. Like all the bad things don't exist. It's just me and the piano. And sometimes when people listen, I think maybe they feel what I feel. Maybe they understand a little bit." The volunteer nodded, smiling. "And that's exactly why your music is so special," they said. "You're sharing a piece of yourself, and that's rare. Most people never do that." The CEO arranged for her to try playing on a slightly bigger piano at a local music studio. It was different from the old upright she was used to. The keys were smoother, the sound richer, and the space around it felt formal and intimidating. She hesitated at first, her hands hovering over the keys, unsure if she could make the same magic happen. "Just let yourself play," the CEO encouraged her. "Pretend it's the same way you do at the center. Nothing has changed except the piano." She took a deep breath and pressed a key. The sound was stronger than she expected, resonating throughout the room. Slowly, she began to play, and the music came alive in a new way. Each note seemed to echo further, filling the studio with emotion. She could feel it vibrating under her fingers, almost as if the piano itself was welcoming her. When she finished, she realized something important. Her music wasn't just for her anymore. It could fill a room, reach people, and leave a lasting impression. That realization filled her with both pride and responsibility. She wanted to share more, to play louder, and to reach more people. The CEO smiled at her. "See, you can do it. You just needed to believe in yourself. And now, the charity event will be just the beginning. People will feel what you feel when you play, and that's a powerful gift." Practicing in the studio became a regular part of her life. She discovered new techniques, experimented with chords, and even began composing her own small pieces. The volunteers helped her record short clips, encouraging her to listen and notice how her music could change with small adjustments. Each day she became more confident, more expressive, and more connected to her art. Meanwhile, word of her talent began to spread quietly. A few volunteers mentioned her to friends and family, and soon, more people in the local music community were curious about the girl who had played at the community center. Some offered advice, some offered encouragement, but all treated her with respect. Recognizing that she had something rare and beautiful to share, the girl also began thinking about her future for the first time. She had always been focused on surviving each day, never imagining a life beyond the shelter walls. But now, the thought of performing at the charity event, of sharing her music with others, sparked dreams she hadn't allowed herself to have. Maybe she could go to a music school, maybe she could meet other musicians, maybe she could even make music a part of her life permanently. The possibilities were both exciting and frightening. One evening, after a long practice session, she sat quietly at the piano and reflected on how far she had come. She remembered the first note she had played at the community center, the hesitant, trembling sound that had begun everything. And now she could play with confidence, emotion, and purpose. She realized that music had given her a voice when words were not enough, and that voice was growing stronger every day. The CEO visited her one last time before the charity event. He wanted to make sure she felt ready, but he didn't pressure her. Instead, he listened as she played a new piece she had composed herself, a melody filled with hope, courage, and the small joys she had found along the way. "That's beautiful," he said softly when she finished. "You've grown so much in a short time. But more importantly, you found your courage. That's what will shine on the stage. People don't just listen to music, they feel it. And you'll make them feel every note." The girl nodded, her heart beating fast. She was nervous, of course, but she also felt ready. She had worked hard, learned, and grown. She had turned her fear into music, and now she was prepared to share it with the world. On the morning of the charity event, she woke with a mix of excitement and anxiety. She dressed carefully, choosing simple clothes that were clean and comfortable. She wanted to feel herself, not a performance costume. She wanted her music to speak, not her appearance. When she arrived at the event, the room was buzzing with people. The piano sat at the front, shiny and polished under bright lights. Volunteers and staff guided her to it, offering small words of encouragement. She took a deep breath and sat down, placing her hands on the keys. The room quieted as she played the first note. It was soft, almost like a whisper, but it immediately captured attention. She let the melody flow naturally, letting her fingers and her heart guide the music. Each note carried her story, her struggles, her hopes, her dreams. Each pause spoke of the nights she had been alone, the moments she had survived, and the courage she had found to keep going. As the music filled the room, the audience was captivated. They didn't just hear the notes, they felt them. Some closed their eyes, some leaned forward, and some smiled with tears in their eyes. Every person in the room could sense the story behind the music, the journey the girl had taken to reach this moment. When she finished, there was silence for a heartbeat, and then the room erupted into applause. It was loud, genuine, and heartfelt. She looked up and saw the CEO standing at the side, clapping proudly, his face filled with pride. She realized in that moment that she had accomplished something extraordinary, not just playing music, but sharing herself with others in a way that mattered. For the first time, she felt truly seen. Not as a homeless girl, not as someone to be pitied, but as a person with talent, courage, and a story worth hearing. And in that realization, she found a new kind of freedom, a freedom she had never experienced before. After her first public performance at the charity event, the girl's life began to feel different, almost surreal. People kept talking about her music, how it moved them, how a single performance could touch so many hearts. She had never thought anyone would notice her, let alone care about her talent. For years, she had lived quietly, often invisible to the world. And now she was being celebrated. Despite the excitement, she also felt nervous. The CEO had invited her to play at several other events, including one large performance in front of a bigger audience. She had never played in front of so many people, and the thought made her stomach churn. Doubts crept in. What if I make a mistake? What if they don't like my music? What if I'm not good enough? The CEO noticed her anxiety when he came to visit her at the community center one morning. "It's normal to feel nervous," he said softly. "Every musician feels that way. The important thing is to remember why you play. Your music is a gift, and sharing it is more important than perfection." She nodded, taking in his words. It wasn't easy to believe them. Her life had been full of obstacles, and self-doubt had been a constant companion. But somehow, hearing him say that made her feel a little braver. She reminded herself of the first time she had pressed a key on the piano at the center, unsure if she could even play. And yet that single note had started everything. If she had dared then, perhaps she could dare again. The volunteers at the center became her support system. They helped her practice daily, encouraging her to try new pieces, to explore different styles, and to feel the music rather than just play the notes. Some days were frustrating. Her fingers would fumble, her timing would falter, or she would feel too tired to concentrate. But every day she learned a little more. Every day she grew a little stronger. One afternoon, she stayed after the center closed, practicing alone. The room was quiet, the soft hum of the heater the only sound besides the piano. She tried a new composition she had been working on for weeks. It was slow at first, hesitant, then it started to flow. The melody rose and fell like waves, carrying emotions she had never expressed before. Joy, sadness, hope, fear, they were all in the music, all coming from her heart. When she finished, she sat back, her hands shaking slightly from the effort and the emotion. She realized that her music had changed. It wasn't just notes on a page anymore. It was her story, her life, her struggles, and her dreams all woven together. And for the first time, she felt proud of herself, not just for playing, but for creating something meaningful. The CEO visited again the next day. "I heard you've been composing your own piece," he said with a smile. "Would you like to share it with me?" She hesitated, unsure if it was ready, but something inside her urged her to try. She sat at the piano, her fingers hovering over the keys, and then began to play. The melody was soft at first, but it grew stronger, filled with confidence and feeling. The CEO listened quietly, clearly impressed. "That was wonderful," he said when she finished. "You're not just a player now. You're a musician. You're telling your story through your music and people will feel it. Remember, that's what matters the most." His words stayed with her as she prepared for the next big event. She would be playing in front of dozens of people, including some music teachers, business leaders, and local dignitaries. The thought was intimidating, but she tried to focus on the music, not the audience. She practiced tirelessly, repeating pieces until they felt like extensions of herself, until the music became natural, flowing from her fingers without thought. The night of the event arrived. She arrived early, dressed simply but neatly. She had learned that her music could speak louder than her appearance. The room was larger than any she had performed in before, filled with rows of chairs, sparkling lights, and people quietly chatting. Her heart raced as she approached the piano. Volunteers and staff guided her to the stage, offering quiet reassurance. The CEO stood nearby, giving her an encouraging nod. "You're ready," he said. "Just play from your heart." She sat down and placed her hands on the keys, closing her eyes. She thought about all the moments that had led her here, the nights in the shelter. The first piano at the community center, the encouragement of the volunteers, and the support of the CEO, all of it had built up to this moment. Her first note rang out, soft and clear, filling the room with warmth. She let the melody flow naturally, her fingers moving confidently across the keys. The music rose and fell, expressing joy, sadness, and hope all at once. She played not for the audience, not for recognition, but for herself and for the story she wanted to tell. As she played, the audience became completely silent, captivated by the emotion in her music. Some closed their eyes, feeling the story she was telling. Others leaned forward, unable to look away. Her music was no longer just a series of notes. It was a bridge between her heart and everyone listening. When she finished, there was a moment of silence, and then applause erupted. It was loud, genuine, and heartfelt. The girl opened her eyes and looked around, feeling a mixture of relief, joy, and disbelief. The CEO was smiling proudly, clapping along with the rest of the audience. For the first time, she realized that her life had truly begun to change. People were not just hearing her music, they were feeling it, understanding it, and valuing it. She was no longer invisible. She had a voice, a presence, and a talent that mattered. After the performance, several people approached her. Some were teachers who offered guidance and advice. Others were local musicians who invited her to collaborate or attend music workshops. A few even offered scholarships to help her pursue formal training. She listened to each person with wide eyes. Feeling a mix of gratitude and astonishment, the CEO stayed with her, quietly proud. "See what happens when you take a chance?" he said softly. "When you share your gift, the world responds. And this is just the beginning. You have so much potential." She nodded, tears brimming in her eyes. For years, she had only dreamed in small ways, never imagining that her life could include opportunities like this. And now, she could see a path forward, a future filled with music, learning, and possibilities she had never dared to consider. The following weeks were a whirlwind. She continued to practice diligently, refining her compositions and learning new pieces. She attended small workshops, met other musicians, and began to imagine a life where music could be more than just an escape, it could be her future. She started to feel proud of her progress and confident in her abilities. Even as her life began to shift, she remained grounded. She remembered the nights in the shelter, the cold floors, and the hunger that had driven her to seek comfort in music. Those memories stayed with her, not as pain, but as reminders of how far she had come and how resilient she had been. They made her music deeper, richer, and more meaningful. One evening, after a long day of practice, she sat quietly at the piano, reflecting on her journey. She realized that every note she played carried a part of her story. Her struggles, her hopes, her fears, and her dreams all were woven into the music. And now, people were listening, understanding, and appreciating her for who she truly was. For the first time in her life, she felt like she belonged. Not in a shelter, not in the shadows, but in the world, sharing her talent, her story, and her heart. And in that moment, she understood that her journey was far from over. The piano had given her a voice, but it was up to her to continue telling her story, to continue playing, and to continue growing. And so, with hope in her heart and music in her soul, she prepared for the next chapter of her life, ready to face the challenges, the opportunities, and the endless possibilities that awaited her. The morning of her biggest performance yet arrived, and the girl felt a mix of excitement, nervousness, and determination. She had come so far from the cold nights in a shelter, to playing on the worn piano at the community center, to performing at small events, and now, finally, she was stepping onto a stage before a large audience who had come to hear her music. Her heart pounded as she got ready, but there was also a quiet strength in her. She had practiced, she had grown, and she had learned to trust her music and herself. Volunteers helped her get dressed, offering small words of encouragement and hugs. The CEO arrived early, checking on her quietly. "You're ready," he said simply. "Remember, it's not about being perfect. It's about sharing who you are." His words reminded her of everything she had been through, the fear, the doubt, and the courage she had found in those small moments at the piano. She nodded, taking a deep breath, feeling the familiar mix of anxiety and hope. When she walked onto the stage, the room was filled with hundreds of people. The lights were bright, the seats were full, and the piano waited for her at the center. For a moment she felt small, almost as if she didn't belong. But then she remembered the first note she had played at the community center, how it had started everything. She placed her fingers on the keys and let that memory guide her. The first note rang out clearly. It was soft but confident, and it captured the attention of everyone in the audience. She closed her eyes and let the music flow naturally, each note carrying the story of her journey. The melody rose and fell, expressing joy, sadness, hope, and resilience. Her fingers moved across the keys with grace, translating emotions that words could never fully express. As she played, she felt the audience's presence, but not in a frightening way. They weren't there to judge her, they were there to listen, to feel, to understand. She realized that this was more than just a performance. It was a connection, a moment where her music reached people's hearts. Each chord carried the struggles she had faced, the nights she had spent alone, and the small sparks of hope that had kept her going. The CEO watched from the side, quietly proud. He had seen her growth over the weeks and months, but seeing her now, performing with such emotion and confidence, was even more powerful. He knew that this performance would change her life, not because of the applause, but because of the courage she had shown in sharing herself so fully. The audience was completely silent as she continued, completely absorbed in her music. Some closed their eyes, letting the melody move through them. Others leaned forward, feeling every note as if it spoke directly to them. Her music told a story of survival, resilience, and hope. It was a story she had lived, a story she had created, and now a story that everyone in the room could feel. When she finished, there was a moment of silence, a breath held in awe, and then the room erupted in applause. It was loud, genuine, and heartfelt. People stood, clapping, cheering, and some wiped tears from their eyes. She opened her eyes, surprised and overwhelmed. For the first time, she truly understood the power of her music. It had the ability to move people, to touch hearts, and to leave a lasting impression. The CEO stepped forward, clapping along with the rest of the audience. "That was incredible," he said when the applause had settled. "You've done something extraordinary today. You've shared your story, your heart, and your talent, and everyone here has felt it." The girl felt tears welling up in her eyes. She looked out at the audience, at the people who had listened so quietly and then clapped so warmly. For years, she had felt invisible, unnoticed, and unimportant. But in that moment, she knew that she mattered, that her music mattered, and that her story could inspire others. After the performance, several people approached her. Some were music teachers who offered to mentor her, helping her develop her skills further. Others were donors and local community members who wanted to support her education and provide resources for her to continue practicing. A few musicians invited her to collaborate or attend workshops. Recognizing the talent and emotion in her playing, she listened to each offer with wide eyes, feeling a mixture of gratitude, excitement, and disbelief. For so long, she had only dreamed of small things: warmth, food, safety, and the quiet moments at the piano. Now, she was being given opportunities she had never imagined, opportunities that could change her life entirely. The CEO stayed with her, quietly proud but letting her bask in the attention and praise she had earned. "See what happens when someone believes in you?" he asked softly. "When you take a chance and share your gift, doors open. And this is just the beginning. You have so much potential, and people are ready to help you reach it." She nodded, tears spilling down her cheeks. She felt a deep sense of gratitude, not just for the CEO, but for everyone who had supported her along the way. The volunteers, the community center staff, the audience who listened with their hearts, and even the small moments of kindness she had experienced all contributed to where she was now. She realized that no one succeeds alone and that every act of encouragement, every small gesture of belief mattered immensely. Over the next few weeks, her life continued to change. She began attending a local music school on a scholarship, learning new techniques, music theory, and performance skills. She practiced diligently, but she also allowed herself moments of joy, composing her own pieces, experimenting with melodies, and sharing her music with friends and mentors. Despite the changes, she remained grounded. She never forgot the nights in the shelter, the struggles she had faced, or the piano at the community center where it all began. Those experiences had shaped her, had given depth to her music, and had taught her resilience. They were a part of her story, a story that she now shared proudly through her music. Her confidence grew with each performance, each lesson, and each new composition. She discovered that her music could inspire others, bring comfort, and even heal. People would often approach her after performances, sharing their own stories and telling her how her music had touched them. She realized that her gift was not just for herself, it was for everyone who needed to feel hope, joy, or understanding through music. One afternoon, she sat at a piano in the music school, reflecting on how far she had come. She thought about the first note she had played at the community center, the first time the CEO had encouraged her, and the first audience who had listened and believed in her. She realized that every step, every small moment had led her to this place. She had grown not just as a musician, but as a person confident, resilient, and full of hope. She also realized that her journey was just beginning. The piano had given her a voice, but it was up to her to continue using it. She wanted to perform, compose, teach, and inspire. She wanted to show that no matter how difficult life could be, it was possible to rise above it, to follow one's passion, and to find light in the darkest moments. The CEO continued to support her, but he also gave her space to grow independently. He encouraged her to take on challenges, perform in new venues, and connect with other musicians. His belief in her had been the first spark, but now she carried the fire within herself. As she prepared for another performance at a larger venue, she felt a quiet excitement. The audience would be bigger, the lights brighter, and the stakes higher, but she no longer felt fear. She felt readiness, courage, and determination. She knew that mistakes were part of growth and that her music could speak louder than her nerves. When she finally stepped onto the stage, the room was filled with anticipation. She sat at the piano, placed her hands on the keys, and let the music flow. Each note carried her story, her journey, and her heart. The audience listened in awe, completely absorbed. And when the final note lingered and faded, the room erupted in applause, louder and more heartfelt than ever before. In that moment, she understood something important. She had not only found her voice, but she had also found herself. The piano had been her escape, her refuge, and her companion, but it had also been her path to the world. Through music, she had transformed her life, touched hearts, and discovered the power of hope, courage, and belief in oneself. And so, her story continued not as a girl who once lived in a shelter, but as a young musician whose talent, courage, and heart had changed everything. She had begun with a single note, and that note had become a melody that would carry her into a future filled with endless possibilities, hope, and music that could move the world.